The disgraced former president Donald Trump has been indicted yet again, this time on 4 counts involved with trying to overturn the 2020 election by special counsel Jack Smith. He faces the charges of conspiracy to defraud the United States, conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, obstruction of and an attempt to obstruct an official proceeding, and conspiracy against rights. The indictment lists 6 co-conspirators, but does not name them. Jack Smith has been looking into Trump's efforts to remain in office following his 2020 election defeat to Joe Biden, including the deadly January 6, 2021 riot in which his supporters overran the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. Let's be clear, this is a former president of the United States being arrested for attempting to cheat in the election, and not just in one jurisdiction, but in multiple jurisdictions, encouraging his supporters to storm the U.S. Capitol, which they did, causing criminal damage, seeking out Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker at the time, seeking out Mike Pence, the Vice President at the time, to kill these people. I mean, let's be clear, that is what their intentions were. And so this is a very serious charge, in addition to the espionage charges and in addition to the sexual abuse charge that he's already been convicted of with the E. Jean Carroll case. Donald Trump is, to all intents and purposes, on the back foot. He is a career criminal, and people who support him and worship him no matter what are affected by Trump contagion theory. It's been widely written about. It is something that mental health professionals understand, and it's something that the mainstream media will not talk about, will not go there, because mental health is an unknown quantity. It's a subject that they don't want to get into. It doesn't suit them to talk about these types of things, and so they kind of refer to politics and business as usual. Now, one question I get asked, probably more than any other question, is will Donald Trump ever go to prison? And what are the chances of Donald Trump winning the next election? So let's just deal with those 2 subjects. The first is, will he go to prison? Well, your guess is as good as mine. My view, and I've maintained this view, is because there is no precedent for a US president being imprisoned or incarcerated, my feeling is he will probably end up under house arrest in Mar-a-Lago for the rest of his life. That's my personal view. I'm willing to be proved wrong, but I think that the actual notion of him being led away in handcuffs, visually, it's very theatrical, and it's the type of event. America thrives on these types of big legal events. We've seen it with the O.J. Simpson trial or Michael Jackson on trial, any of these moments where the world is watching, and America is always caught up in these very public events, which typically and traditionally would be quite private. So Donald Trump is going to be the one to make a big scene of this. The FBI won't do it. The Justice Department won't do it. It will all be of Trump's making. He will make it as big and as show business-like as possible, because that's how he seeks to feed the machine that is him stealing money from his supporters. And if you have given money to the Trump campaign, you'll know that that money has been used for Melania Trump's hairdresser, for Trump's legal bills to the tune of $40 million, travel, and all sorts of things that you probably didn't think it was going to. Okay, let's talk about the second one, which is, will Donald Trump win the election? Well, my view is that he will still run and be the candidate, even if he is prosecuted, even if he is incarcerated, even if he's under house arrest. And then we have to ask ourselves, just how popular is Donald Trump? So if he's to run, what are the chances of him winning? Well, I don't personally think that his support is anything like what he would have you believe. For example, his base, as we know, is a small percentage of Republicans. Not all Republicans are MAGA Republicans. And so that core group who go to the rallies and buy the hats and the T-shirts and wave the flags, they represent maybe, 20-30% of Republicans. So that is a very small committed base, very much in the cult of Trump. But you also have to ask yourself why he isn't getting kind of more traction when it comes to his own social media platform, for example. And one of the ways I like to kind of see how much traction he's getting is by looking at these truths that he puts out on Truth Social, seeing how many retruths he gets, what we used to call a retweet on the old Twitter platform, and how many likes and how much engagement, how many responses and replies. Let's use one for an example. I assume that an indictment from deranged Jack Smith and his highly partisan gang of thugs pertaining to my peacefully and patriotically speech, of course that's not English, will be coming out any day now as yet another attempt to cover up all of the bad news about bribes, payoffs, and extortion coming from the Biden camp. That's a lie. This seems to be the way they do it. Election interference, prosecutorial misconduct. Well, not only is that grammatically atrocious, but also, let's be clear, it's had just 9,000 retruths, like a retweet, nearly 3,000 comments, and 31,000 likes. Now, that is not the kind of, the millions that this ex-president or ex-dictator should really be getting on his platform. And if there are really as many people as he thinks, if he thinks he is in the lead in the polls, he says that, it's quite ambiguous. He's obviously thinks that it's versus Joe Biden, but it isn't. He's very much behind. And then when you look at the polls for the primaries, you'll see that Trump is out front and DeSantis comes in second place, depending on which poll you look at. But Trump does not represent the leader of, all across all parties in a potential general election. He actually is the loser as it stands, based on current polling. He's been the loser multiple times now. He's never won the popular vote. As you know, all the candidates that he supported in the midterms, most of them did not win. And of course, he lost in 2020. So we're talking about a guy who has typically lost time and time again, whose base is shrinking. The more indictments and the more facts that come out about Trump's criminality, I think you need to acknowledge and accept that he actually has a diminishing amount of support. And whilst Joe Biden might not be a perfect candidate, Democrats do not worship him in the same way that Trump's base worship Trump like a god. And we don't want to worship our leaders here in the United States. We are not a dictatorship. That is not how it works. But unfortunately, that's what Trump craves. He looks up to dictators. He wants to be one. To all intents and purposes, he is one. And that is one really good reason why you really do not want him winning another 4 years in the White House. The cult of Trump is so strong that people will still support him, even from a prison cell. And it's happened before in other countries. It's not happened in the US before, but it's legal to have a candidate who is not free. And I fear that because of Trump contagion theory, the undue influence, the brainwashing, that MAGA supporters will be paying for his legal fees. They will be supporting him like he is a messiah, when in fact he is a sad, lonely, unintelligent man who is just, somehow got elected through a perfect storm of various things in 2016 and has created this business, this marketing exercise where Trump is a brand and people are buying into it. And if you know anything about cults, and if you know anything about brainwashing, and you know anything about authoritarianism or dictators, you will see that Trump ticks every box, including, of course, the malignant narcissism box, which, again, dozens and dozens of mental health professionals have diagnosed him as having, which is why he fails to see how his constant denial of these charges and his self-obsession and his desire to bring down these pillars of these institutions of the US, like the Justice Department and the FBI, and of course the current executive branch, constant criticism, deflecting, projecting, and hating. This has been the most damaging period of American political history. And Donald J. Trump, one solitary man, is the reason for the hatred and the division. It's not necessary. We're all the same. And yet one guy has caused families to be torn apart and for a political system to be on its knees. I'm Anthony Davis. You can hear me every day on the 5 Minute News podcast, on Wednesdays hosting MAGA Uncovered with Ron Filipkowski, and on Sundays on The Weekend Show with Midas Touch.